It all started with an idea, a slightly flawed idea. Tired of the Parisian routine, the vagabond had only one desire: to travel again. Going back to Australia seemed like the easiest option. Work a little, then keep traveling. But his visa application dragged on, and day after day, he found it harder and harder to stay put. Then one day, almost casually, a friend said to him, "Why don't you go to New Zealand? It's right next to Australia, and it's beautiful." 2 months later, he landed in Auckland. But what was the plan? There wasn't one. The vagabond had decided to set off without a plan, to see where fate would take him. Another shaky idea. Luckily, he was sitting next to a New Zealander. She advised him to start with the Northland, the small region tucked between Auckland and the northern tip of the island. And so his journey began. After preparing his bike and mapping out his route to the tip of the island, it was finally time for the vagabond to hit the road. Freedom, peace, and the simple pleasure of the moment awaited him. These magical landscapes, full of serenity, far from the urban chaos and noise. And yes, the accident came faster than he could have imagined. On his very first day, at the end of the afternoon, a storm broke out. Within minutes, he was soaked from head to toe, and the wind blew so hard that moving forward was nearly impossible. But the worst was yet to come. His bike chain snapped, stopping him in his tracks, just a few kilometers away from the campsite. Waiwera. That was the name of the village where the vagabond found himself stranded. It was 6 p.m., already dark. The village looked deserted. The rain fell relentlessly, and the nearest bike shop was nearly 20 kilometers away. So he did what he did best in situations like this. Nothing. Wait for a guardian angel to come to his rescue. And that angel appeared. He ran into a local, explained his situation, and the man, full of kindness, took him to his neighbor and asked if she could host this poor, soaked vagabond. She gladly agreed. That's how he met Sarah and Luca. They spent the evening at their place. It was a fulfilling evening, filled with anecdotes about each other's lives. The vagabond took the opportunity to learn more about the region he was about to cross, its landscapes, its people, and the little stories that made it unique. The next day, they drove him to the nearby town to get his bike repaired. And there he was, back on the Northland trails once again. But the more days passed, the more the vagabond felt unsettled. New Zealand wasn't what he had imagined. Having crossed Indonesia and Japan, he had expected this journey to be a pleasant ride. For him, the bike was just a tool to reach unique and stunning places. But he had to admit it. this trip was far more demanding than anything he had done before. First, there was his physical condition. He hadn't done any sport for months, and every day he had to tackle routes with extreme and frequent elevation changes, between 500 and 800 meters of ascent and descent on average per day. He spent his days climbing a hill only to descend it immediately, then move on to the next one. The effort was so exhausting that he barely covered 50 kilometers a day, and he moved so slowly that even the snails seemed to greet him kindly as they crossed his path. As for the weather, it showed him no mercy. Rain, storms, freezing wind. He was at the mercy of the sky's ever-changing moods, which shifted every 5 minutes from a light drizzle to a torrential downpour. Then a brief, barely noticeable ray of sunshine, quickly chased away by the next shower. He spent his days putting on and taking off his poncho, looking like a walking garbage bag, flailing under the assault of the wind. Overwhelmed by everything happening to him, he felt like a fish thrown for the first time into the open sea, inexperienced and lost. The only way to survive was to change his approach. After a particularly tough first week, the vagabond, exhausted, decided to stop for a few days at a campsite to catch his breath and take a step back from everything that was happening. Should he keep going, return to Auckland, change his route, wait for the weather to be more favorable? He was torn by a flood of conflicting emotions. Thanks to those few days of rest, the vagabond had regained his strength. Body and mind being closely connected, his spirits had lifted as well. His thoughts were slowly clearing, even though no precise plan had taken shape yet. The future remained blurry, like a path without markers. But one certainty now stood out. Whatever happened, he would continue this journey, heading north toward the tip of the island, Cape Reinga.
coffee
and avocado.
and avocado.
It had been several weeks since the vagabond began his journey. Compared to the first week of the trip, the vagabond standing on that rock was no longer quite the same. His bike was now perfectly set up. He could pack his belongings and pitch his tent in just a few minutes. Used to the road, his body required less food, and he was now able to cover longer distances. In fact, only a few kilometers remained before reaching Cape Ranga. It could be said, without hesitation, he had fully adapted to this new way of life. Body and mind were now in harmony with the demands of the journey.